Welcome to the Hustle and Flow podcast.
A platform we use to explore varying perspectives and opinion through candid conversation.
We chat about philosophy, business, and all things life. I'm Shaun the Hustle.
And I'm Les the Flow.
Let's go.
All right, just to make a little bit of an amendment to what I just said, I won't be wearing the Flow hat in this episode. That belongs to my Flow sensei and mentor, who is our guest today, Jiro Taylor. Jiro is a man who has lived a life of hustle at one stage and then lent heavily into flow. Now lives according to natural principles and brings the two worlds together in a beautiful harmony. Jiro is the founder of the Flowstate Collective, a platform where he helps tech founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs find flow and derive a deeper connection and meaning in what they do and offer to the world. He is also a sage mentor and guide who leads leaders through spiritual quests in shedding the illusion of the ego and helping them to step into their power and find a deeper, more profound connection with life. Jiro is a liver of life to the fullest degree, and he's an eternally curious soul who inquires deeply into dark edges and from them finds light of wonder and awe. So thank you, brother, for joining us, Jiro. Welcome.
Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much.
So it's lovely to meet you, Jiro. This is the first time we're speaking, and Les speaks very highly of you and a lot about you. And I know that you've been instrumental for him on his journey of growth. So it's lovely to finally meet you. And Les has shared a little bit with us now about you, but would love to hear from you, and I guess learn from you a bit more about your origin and where you come from and how you've come to be the man you are today.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's always the question of how far back to go when asked these origin questions. You could go back lifetimes. Yeah, just in this lifetime, brought up by a very religious mother and was kind of like brought up in a cult pretty much, Jehovah's Witness, knocking on doors, church multiple times a day, and just sort of force-fed belief systems, and just had dogma and ideology just rammed into my young child head from an early age. And so when I broke out of that at the age of 15, there was sort of like a pretty radical sense of breaking away from control and brainwashing and walking towards the streams of pure experience and exploring the truth of my own experience, and also exploring different wisdom traditions and learning from the earth, but also from different philosophies and spiritual traditions. And that began pretty early, like in my late teens for me. I was reading and studying and practicing meditation and so forth. And I ended up living in Japan for a couple of years, just tracing Zen Buddhism and really understanding my ancestry because I have Japanese heritage. And it was a beautiful experience of really learning just a completely different paradigm of existence and perceiving the mind and so forth. And I went pretty deep into Zen at that stage. And then as someone in my early 20s, I felt the pull towards to making money and all the typical things that guys in our culture get pulled towards, the perception of glory and success and possessions and making my dad proud and fulfilling some notion of success that our culture kind of reinforces again and again and again. And so I thought I'd give it a go. I had the sense that it wasn't real, that wasn't the real truth, that wasn't real success. I had the sense, but I was still curious and I wanted to actually taste it for myself. So I joined the corporate world and I was a headhunter in the finance industry, moving investment bankers and traders from bank to hedge fund to bank, and making a lot of money and stuffing a lot of coke up my nose and just generally being a little wolf of Wall Street. My ego pretty quickly latched on to this identity as a hustler and a sort of kind of like successful person in the sort of mainstream view. And it led me to having a lot of money and a lot of kind of like ego validation But in all other dimensions of my life, it was actually crushing my soul, and there was a great emptiness, and there was more fear than I'd ever had in my life of losing it all. And I was getting kind of like, my spirit was just getting trampled on, and I was surrounded by people who were just trying to make as much money as they could, and it all felt very soulless. And I spiraled into kind of a dark pit of anxiety and really strong ego kind of like projections, lots of judgment of other people, lots of anger and rage, and lots of bitterness. And I ended up becoming a person that wasn't a very nice person to be around. And fortunately I had just enough awareness in the self-awareness tank to check myself and to look in the mirror. And this happened over a period of months and years of just looking at myself in the mirror, until I reached a point where I simply could not live with myself going down this track. I simply could not live with that sense of compromise. And I guess I'd woken to the fundamental truth that happiness is no correlation to money or ego validation. And I severed that completely. And that began this quest. I quit the corporate world, and I went on a multi-year journey that still continues to this day to really commit to what is truly at the heart of contentment and happiness and contribution and purpose. And I went around the world finding masters and working with shamans and experts of all sorts of ancient modalities, and working with flow state experiences so many different ways, and sign my life around flow state principles. And so that's what I did. I literally morning and design my day around achieving maximum flow, or being in the deepest flow. And that was a portal through which I obviously gained a high level of presence, and that enabled me to gain like types of wisdom and power that I didn't know were possible, and to connect with the earth in a way that expanded my soul and nourished my being. And one thing led to another. Once I was on that path, it's just been a very natural evolution and a really beautiful process of just remembering the powerful being that I am, and rekindling the wild wisdom within me. And that's what's led to me working with people to lead them down the same path. And that's a long way of giving you my origin story.
Thanks, bro. It's always nice to hear that story from you. I've heard it a few times before, but yeah, it is a story that I've told you many times before. It's inspirational to me. It's a path that I have somewhat walked myself, and I really like to hear that from you. And I think it's useful for our audience to hear as well. What we're trialing out now with our guests is asking them about this notion of hustle and flow. Now, I know that your interpretation of these words is going to be a little bit different to what it was, or the life that you have lived. But I know that also there is a semblance of interpretation or personal viewpoint that still resembles that to this day. So when I say those words, what comes up for you, man?
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, as you described, there's a sort of old paradigm and a new paradigm way of perceiving both of those worlds. And, you know, the old paradigm of hustle is getting shit done and like being a really effective doer of stuff. And I became a really effective doer of stuff. So I understand that dimension of hustle. I can even honor that dimension of hustle. You know, what determines the value of that dimension of hustle is really the source of what goes into it. I sometimes get my hustle on, and it's like it's awesome. It's like I have flow sessions where I collapse the paradox between hustle and flow, where I'm hustling and flowing at the same time. But this new paradigm of perceiving hustle, I would use words like sovereignty, in the sense that it contrasts against surrender, and surrender is more of the flow, and hustle's more of the sovereignty. So you're sort of like stepping up and claiming some sort of power, and that's very much part of the warrior aesthetic that I draw from. And then when it comes to flow, there's the old paradigm perception of flow as being a very inactive, passive kind of state of you know, and even if I use the word surrender, many people would denote even a sense of like failure or a sense of weakness or a sense of giving up. But the new way of perceiving flow and surrender is a very activated and a very courageous type of surrender, where there's a very conscious decision to actually let go of the illusion of control and to plunge deep into the journey, into the mystery of life.
Cool, thank you, man. Now, I want to pass over to you, Shauna. I know this man intimately enough. So perhaps there is a few things that you want to dive into.
Yeah, so I think, people generally have their own perceived or perception of hustle and flow and what it means to them. And usually they feel like they need to choose one or the other. And I think the interesting thing that you mentioned was, when you were describing your perception of hustle or how you identified with it, even in the past and now in the present, and you're able to honor it, even though, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, you could say that the hustle was part of what led you down that path that you didn't want to be on at one stage.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And with that, so I think like there's this notion out there that you have to choose one or the other as an individual. Either you're someone who does hustle or you're someone who like surrenders to the flow. Whereas I think there's a symbiosis there, and you can be one or the other. And there's different times that call for that, right? And different things that you do in your life. And you can live in both of those states.
Oh, 100%. So it's like it's the wrong perception in my opinion anyway to draw this polarity between hustle and flow. Actually, the polarity that's always going on is, are we coming from our mind or are we coming from our heart? Or are we coming, or do our actions flow from our ego, or do our actions flow from the core of our being? And when they flow from the core of our being, I can hustle and flow, and it's all just me expressing the truth of who I am. And so that's where I see it all becoming one.
And that's super interesting. And I think it's something people don't or may not have ever thought about, being able to do that. And another thing that you mentioned that I'd love to delve down is the source and of where it's coming from. And how do you, I guess for a lot of people, they don't think about that. And how do you, work out where you're coming from the ego, where you're coming from the mind, or whether you're coming from the heart and adjust?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, the way that I perceive the source is very simple. My feeling body is a very highly attuned instrument, just like our highly attuned instruments, where my actions flow from. When I'm in the mind, there's a signature to that. There's even a facial expression for it. The brow goes furrowed and we begin to feel a bit more tenseness and so forth. But when we're coming from the heart, when we're coming from our being, there's a sense of openness and expansiveness and relaxedness. And that's one very simple way to determine where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I think it's a nice way to look into or delve a little bit deeper into this notion of service and how we strike a balance, if you will, or perceive it differently. And I'm talking in reference to the business world, and this is something that you and I have been talking about recently, Jiro. How we sort of navigate these old paradigms of business and interpret it as something that is meaningful, comes from the heart and the soul, and shatter those old beliefs or those old, walls or barriers, because there are a lot of people out there, and again, myself included, who have these old thoughts about what business is, and we want to be conscious and do the right thing and offer or do good into the world, so to speak. There's these really righteous notions that people want to take into the world, but how do we marry the two, do you think?
So just help me with that one. Married to what?
So marry the two in terms of, being able to sustain yourself in the world and, do so from a place of the heart.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't even see it as something that needs marrying these days. It feels so clear to me that the best way to serve in all ways, in all dimensions, is to come from the heart, to come from the deepest place. It just seems so obvious. If you just take capitalism for a moment and business to be vehicles for some form of expression, or some form of service, some form of product, right? I know that we could go deeper into like the nuances of what sort of vehicles these are, but let's just assume for a moment that money, that capitalism, that business are kind of like just neutral conduits of our gifts and our words and our power and our wisdom, right? Then does it not make sense to come from the most powerful place, to come from truth? Because then truth is going to flow through that business, and truth is going to resonate with the part of that person that wants truth. And so to me, it's just because I guess I know the power of the heart, I know the power of truth, and I know the power of vulnerability, and I know the power of just like real raw expression. And I know that because the reason why I know these things are powerful is because they are of the earth. They represent the rawness of the universe flowing through me. So they're as powerful as the universe itself. And so it seems pretty damn obvious that there's no marrying that needs to happen. It's just that there's been some malware, some defunct code that's been incepted into our consciousness over time. That's been part of the human narrative. Around success and around materialism and around business, and it's just malware that's come down, and it's created, the ego's latched onto it, and it's just created all these false narratives, including one which says that there's this seeming paradox between living from the heart and making a successful business. That paradox does not exist.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And I think it's once you do understand the power of truth and the power of your heart and act from that place, things truly change for you. And I think there's different ways of getting to that. And I'd be interested to know, how did you come to find the power in those things yourself, Jiro?
Well, first of all, I had to spend a lot of time living in untruth. Like really feeling it, like experiencing life as caged within the prison of my own ego, my own insecurities, my own limitations, this web of narratives and belief systems that like kept me caged. I really had to experience that. I had to experience the lack of vitality and the deadening effect of it. And so that when I began to touch truth and express truth and perceive truth and channel truth, oh man, it's like a trickling stream, like rainwater is running through a parched riverbed. It just begins to regenerate, begins to feel awesome, and it brings other life to the river. Like it's contagious. Like people want to lean into your truth and they want to express your truth, and before you know it, you just remember that there is this choice to live in truth and to express vulnerably, and there's just this part of us that blocks it, and that part of us is the part of us that always creates the limitation and the doubt and the anxiety and the indecision, and it doesn't lead to thriving. If we live through that part of us, it leads to the opposite of thriving. So yeah, I guess the short answer would be just like experimentation of living in both ways.
And what was because I guess there's people who listen to this that might be feeling the way that you were feeling when you weren't where you wanted to be. And I guess, were there some things that, you started to do very early on in your own process of transformation that you could recommend to people that they might be able to delve down, that might save them a bit of time?
Yeah. This might not be the popular cliche way of dealing with the problem of being caged within your life, but it's the truth. It's up to you whether you can handle it, but here it is. Until you take radical self-responsibility for where you're at in life, you're fucked. you're a victim. You're a victim of circumstance. You got no power. You've given away your power to other things in your life. So you have to start by taking radical self-responsibility for the situation that you're in. Like, you really have to own it. You have to be like, I chose this. I repeatedly chose this. In many, many ways, I chose this. And I made a million decisions that validated this fundamental choice to be in the position that I'm in right now. And you have to actually be courageous enough and self-aware enough to be like, oh, yeah, I can't. It's just about responsibility, right? So once you've taken that responsibility, now you can get to work, right? Now you can start making new choices, because now you've just said, okay, choice is my power. And I've previously chosen to do things that have led to this situation. So now I can make new choices that will lead me to a different situation. And that's where it begins. One choice after another choice, after another choice, after another choice. And the second level is this. Every single choice is either has a signature of fear or love, contraction or expansion within it. Every single choice. If you really dissect it, every single choice, whether you eat that McDonald's or not, or whether you choose to quit your job or not, or whether you choose to, take your wife for a picnic, every single choice in life has got either contraction energy or expansion energy. The contraction energy is fear. And if you make choices that come from that place, then you're just going to go deeper and deeper. You're just validating your ego, and you're just going to go deeper into that hole. But if you begin to make your choices more and more from that place of expansiveness, which sounds nice, but it's actually the scary path. Commonly, expansion is to like take the leap, to leap out the comfort zone and to try new things, and to, we have to face the fears and the anxieties and so forth on that path, but do it over and over again, and you will begin to experience a completely different paradigm of existence, and you'll begin to gain the sort of power and confidence and self-belief that will help you make the big decisions, the big choices, like leaving careers or moving countries or breaking out of relationships that don't serve you. You'll be able to make those big choices because you'll have such a sense of clarity and self-awareness from having made all the micro choices from that place of love.
No, I would totally wholeheartedly second all of that. I think, once you do take responsibility for yourself and where you are in your life, that's when things can change. And, we are all the sum of our choices. I truly believe that. And when you do realize that, all your choices can come from either that place of expansiveness or contraction, I think you start to delve down a path where you approach your choices very differently and start making them a lot more consciously.
Fully. Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably the definition of what it is to become more conscious, right? It's like, that's the hitting the nail on the head. It's just like, it's that every single second, microsecond. It's just constantly, we're constantly meeting these choice points where we can go that way or that way. And it's like bringing that consciousness of, is it expansive or is it contractive? That's really where it begins, man.
And I know that at the start you mentioned that you were still on this journey, and I believe that we all are, and we forever are on this journey, right? But just not to downplay the arduous path that is walked, or we continue to walk. I mean, consistency and keeping yourself accountable and being able to continue down this path, and committing to that as a lifelong journey is key. And I'd like you to expand upon that and see, maybe like provide some examples of how you might have stumbled at the start, or whether it was difficult or easy for you for the whole time.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, still stumbling. It's like, the stumbling is the path, right? Like just like a baby falling over and constantly when learning to walk, that is the path, right? So I honor the stumbling, but looking back on the journey, there were once I had, I guess you could see my journey in a few different stages. And this first stage of moving to Japan and diving into Zen Buddhism and realizing so many profound things, having so many epiphanies, and then finding myself in the corporate world. Well, that was an absolute U-turn. I was literally thinking about becoming a monk, and then the next thing you know, I'm a wanker in a $5,000 suit, thinking he's the man in a city working a corporate job, and it's like, on one sense, like, what a U-turn, what a stumbling, but on another sense, what a profound part of my journey, what an epic quest that my soul called me on, to go into the belly of the beast so that I could learn for myself. So it's a beautiful stumbling that led to an acceleration if you zoom out far enough. And I think that all of my stumblings I would perceive in the same way. So I guess that, what I'm saying is that I don't have any stories of stumblings that weren't, when I zoom out, weren't just like actually the prime catalysts of further growth.
I think it's such a beautiful way to look at it, but also a very practical way to look at it. The stumblings that you have.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm all about looking at it practically, like, simply because what's the point of looking at it in other ways? Like this thing around, like, I talk a lot about honoring our past and really, really going deep in the mythology of our lives to really draw and heighten awareness of the arc of transformation that we've gone on our life, and all the shadows and all of the pitfalls and all the stumblings and everything, to actually look at it as a emerging mythology. Like, it's a hero's story, it's a hero's journey that we've been on, and there's a beauty in just choosing to see it as a wonderful, amazing, emergent, original, unique adventure. I just don't see the utility, just to speak in terms of like usefulness. Like, what is the utility of choosing to perceive our story as failure, or choosing to see things in that way? It's like, if seeing as we have the choice, we are the storytellers of our own life, why not make it an epic one? Why not choose to infuse it with the meaning? And I guess this does take some intelligence or a particular type of consciousness to tune into this type of choice. But I feel like this is really important. Like, we've all gone through experiences in lives, but most people just kind of like allow them to be linear and sort of like reduced, bland, mechanical versions of their life stories. Oh yeah, I lived in America, and then I went to college over here, and then I got a job at Google, and then quit that job and I moved to Australia, and it's just like this series of events. And it's like, that's just the analytical perspective of your life, right? Like, if you actually open up to the mythology of your life, it's almost like looking at the quantum nature of your life, and actually in every single moment of your life, you're experiencing feelings and emotions, and you're at a threshold, and there was some great mystery or some archetypal dragon that you had to slay, and there was some amazing guru or mentor that was helping you, and there was all these feelings and emotions. And I believe that when we spend more time journaling on this sort of stuff and remembering this sort of stuff, and like rekindling, reimagining the narrative of our lives, we can begin to really texturize, and it puts us in a position of claiming our story, which is to claim our power, which is to really like enhance our self-awareness. And it's the dissolution of all imposter syndrome and all of that shit that our ego spews up around we're not good enough, or who are we? Because once you really enhance your hero story, you're like, fuck, this was epic, and I'm a powerful being, and I got to share this stuff. So yeah, bit of a tangent, but felt good to share.
No, it's amazing. And I think that's such a beautiful way to live, and opening up to the mythology of your life. It's something that I haven't thought about, because it's true, when you do ask people about who they are, where they've been, what they've done, they do give you that really, as you call it, analytical run of their life. It's just events, right? Like, that couldn't mean much to anyone, but it's once you attach meaning to those events that they start to texturize and get that color. And if you stop and think about it, we have all slayed some dragons, and we have all had gurus that have helped us. And I think also acknowledging that and taking time to think about it, and then, it definitely does enhance your own sense of the hero that you are in your own life.
For sure. And it infuses your life with so much meaning. And this is the thing that's missing from so many people's lives, right? I'm sure you brothers will agree with me that, when you go into these offices in the corporate world, and you just go to shopping malls, and you just tune into like the state of the world. The problem is not the anxiety and the PTSD and the diabetes and the suicides. That's a symptom, right? The actual illness is a loss of meaning, a lack of deep meaning, a loss of the sacredness of life. And so when we mythologize our life like this, when we claim the service to ourselves away from the profane, analytical, humdrum, separate kind of way of existence that our culture kind of seems to proliferate, and we're rekindling this really deep, enriched, profound, multidimensional, textured way of perceiving ourselves, and therefore by extension the earth and all of life. So by mythologizing our life and dropping deeper into the meaning of our own journey, we begin to be able to zoom out and have great existential breakthroughs where we begin to perceive the meaning of all life and our role in the web of life. And to me, that's a pretty important part of becoming a contributive being on Earth. So yeah, going into the myth.
Definitely. And is there a way that you could recommend to people to start to delve into the mythology of their own life?
So I've been really diving deep into this particular path of reclaiming the myth of our lives. And so a really simple practice for people: watch movies that have a hero's journey in them. But also there's some beautiful work out there by Joseph Campbell about the hero's journey. And so the hero's journey is this arc of transformation that is one of nature's patterns. This is embodied by every sea turtle or seagull that breaks out of a shell and finds its way to feeding grounds and breeding grounds. And we're just the same. We have this same arc of transformation where we meet dangers and pitfalls and we break through. And this is just how transformation happens. So what I'd recommend people to do is to just Google hero's journey and go to images, and you'll see the circle, which is the map of the hero's journey. And it's got these 12 sections, and it's like the status quo at home, and leaving home, and then finding a guru or a mentor, finding Obi-Wan or Yoda, and then or Morpheus, and then you're like learning wisdom, and then you're going into the underworld where you're meeting the dangers and so forth. And I'd advise people just to look at this, study it, and then actually look at your own life and see the journeys that you've taken and how they correlate to each of the stages on the hero's journey. And this will retexturize the myth of your life. This will enable you to see, just using this very beautiful map of transformation, that you have been on a journey, that you are a hero, that you have been through this classic archetypal innate journey of transformation in life.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, like you said, we talk about this a lot all the time in terms of just looking back and really understanding that a lot of these roadblocks or challenges that you have faced in life is sort of like an initiation of sorts that you have gone through. It just lacks that container of ceremony or sacredness per se, but it is not to devalue your experiences that you've had in life. And I think that there's certain things that have led you to where you are now, Jiro, in terms of how you perceive the journey and how that narrative plays out in your mind. So could you share some of the tools perhaps that you've sort of used? Because I think for the most part, this sort of journey requires a good level of, trust and intuition. And it's a language that at surface or initially when you start off, you don't actually speak it or understand it per se, right? So that would be helpful for perhaps people to understand that what sort of tools can be used to support this.
You mean tools like meditation and tools like different sorts of like natural technologies and so forth?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, we're blessed to have many sorts wisdom traditions and many tools to help us on this path of remembrance and becoming more conscious. And you know, I know, Leslie, you have a very dedicated meditation practice, and I too have been meditating for over 20 years. And you know, the reason why meditation has stuck around for thousands of years is because it's highly effective, and it's just so necessary, even more so in this world of hyper distraction and so forth. So meditation is a tool that I use. Also just deep time in nature, really connective experiences in nature, spending time silently in forests, listening to the birds, and just being still and creating the space in my life for that. I work extensively and reverently with plant medicines, and I see plants as a particular part of the earth or the plant kingdom that has a profound role to play in the expansion of consciousness. These plants are clearly conduits of codes that really do expand human consciousness and enable us to remember deep truths and to even step up as agents of nature herself. So I work with plants in a shamanic and ceremonial way. Are, you know, just like being very conscious of who you're hanging out with and what you're feeding your consciousness, you know, just like there's no need to watch news, and there's no need to be surrounded by people that bring your vibe down. Just like curate the environment around you that leads to the highest vibe. And I guess those are, you know, there's a million tools I could talk about, from the shamanic to like different mantras and things like that. Breath work is a practice that I've done a lot of work with, and also just flow, you know, like creating experiences. I surf a lot. I'm in the ocean a lot, and I play guitar, and these ways of either experiencing flow through embodiment and movement, like surfing, or experiencing flow through artistic creative expression, through poetry or making music or any form of artistic expression. These are profound pathways to the expansion of consciousness and the remembering of the amazing beings that we are. So I'd really, so nature connection, meditation, artistic expression, and flow are like, wow, if you go deeper into those, you're really going to evolve in a beautiful and accelerated way.
Yeah, totally, man. Stuff that I have leveraged myself. Then Shaun has also many of these practices himself. But I would like to draw you deeper down this hole a little bit. And if someone were to ask you, mate, I guess, how are they to, I guess, know that this is the right path they're taking, or the right calling they're receiving, or the right message, and in bridging this very, you know, rigid semantic gap of language versus that gut feel that people talk about, that intuition, what would you say to people if they ask you something like that?
How to bridge that gap, or how to know what to plunge into.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to just feeling it. But there's a pathway to being able to feel it as well. So some people are so disembodied and so stuck in their thinking minds that it's actually really hard to listen to the feeling or the intuition. And so in those early stages, you just got to experiment, and you just got to go for it. And you just got to say yes to things, and you got to try different pathways and commit with totality. And to go to the art class, or to pick up a guitar, or to go to have a new experience, or instead of spending the weekend getting pissed at the pub, go do a free diving course, or, you know, go learn to surf. Like, you just got to try things, you know. I think that's part of it. And then the more time you spend in this state of flow and presence, the more you're actually activating this intelligence system, which is feeling. So you're going to gain the subtlety of awareness, and then that can just become the compass for you. You can just start to follow that. And so now it's just, you reach a stage, or I've reached a stage where, my compass for life is just my feeling intelligence. It's just, I just follow that. Just what do I feel? Does that feel good? Well, I just go that way. So yeah, that's what I'd say about that.
Cool. And I think there is a lot to be said about just delving into things. Like I said, our thinking mind gets in the way a lot of times. And a lot of times you find yourself thinking about, should I be doing this or should I be doing that? When a lot of times if you just pick one and delve down the path, you'll soon find out if that's where you're meant to be or not.
For sure. We just got to experiment and learn, right? We got to use curiosity as a portal to just leap into rabbit holes and try things.
And then I think you do, when you have the attitude of just, I'm going to delve in and see how I go and how I feel about it, and then actually try to tune into how you feel in those moments, you start to find the things that, resonate with you. Whereas if you never try them and you keep trying to just analyze what it might be like, you can't compare.
No, you just got to get your own direct life experience. This is really, really important. That, there's a limit to the value of reading books and watching documentaries. That they're valuable because they can take you closer to that threshold of actually trying something yourself. But until you actually have a connective, immersive experience in which you are using your body and your mind to engage in something new, you have to get yourself under the waterfall. You have to get yourself to the plant medicine ceremony. You have to actually do the experiences. Otherwise, they just remain theories in your mind, or it's just someone else's version of events. It's not going to be transformative. Yeah,
for sure. And there's also a concept, Jiro, I know that you advocate for, and that's, I've read about it on your own website, and that's awakened leadership. And it's something that interests me. And I guess I just wanted to see if you could elaborate on that and explain to people that are listening what awakened leadership is to you and how you've found yourself on that path.
Yeah, sure. I mean, awakened leadership is really what it says on the tin. It's leadership coming from a place of awakeness or consciousness. The contrast to this concept is unawakened leadership or lower conscious leadership. And look, we just have to look at the heads of companies and the heads of countries to perceive that there is a fundamental problem at the heart of mainstream leadership. There's many leaders out there who are just unevolved beings. Maybe they're just really good at playing political games, or they're really intelligent in a certain way, but there's a certain type of unevolved leadership that has accelerated the destruction of our planet. And it's this leadership where there is just self-interest at heart, or short-term perceptions. And so awakened leadership is to really come from the totality of our intelligence, or to use yoga terms, it's to have all of our chakras opened, or it's to be activated and awakened in the sense that we know who we are, we know that we're part of the earth, and we're living in contribution to all of life. So our purpose, our direction, the function of our leadership is not to serve us or some tiny faction of humanity or the profits of some company, but the function of leadership is to serve life itself. This is awakened leadership that serves life itself. And so it becomes a very natural thing when a leader goes through certain life experiences where they remember that they are life itself, that they are part of this beautiful emergent system of existence. Well, then it would be almost like psychopathic to not then choose to be in service to all of life itself. So awakened leadership just emerges from the journey of our own awakening until we reach a point where we're like, well, I cannot not step up and serve life. It becomes unavoidable and unstoppable. So that's what I mean by awakened leadership.
It's very cool to hear, because I think what you spoke about, an unevolved leadership, is something that's just kills so many souls, to put it bluntly, and by people that don't know any better and are looking to people for leadership. I think it's a very dangerous state of affairs for someone to be in a position where, you know, they're being looked to as a leader and they don't have this awareness in areas of their lives, and they just try to serve themselves. And in doing so, it's damaging for people. I think, you know, I can speak for myself. I've been in environments like that. And Les, you know, from things you've told me about your past experiences in the corporate world and things like that, I know you definitely experienced that as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's sort of like, again, it's this lasting paradigm that has been kept or attempted to be kept alive through like antiquity, right? And I think now, especially now, at this point in time, it's what, mid-May as we're recording this. We're sort of still in self-isolation and all that sort of thing, and we're seeing how old structures or antiquated structures are dealing or not dealing with a crisis or a pandemic that the world is facing. It shows the inability to pivot or adapt or evolve and shift to an ever-changing environment. So it sort of highlights that it's time for a new paradigm to come through.
Totally. And just to talk more about this awakened leadership. So in native indigenous cultures, there's prophecies that prophesy this shift, this turn of the wheel, this shift away from this unawakened leadership or unevolved leadership towards something new. And often in these indigenous traditions, like in Australia, for example, I went to a ceremony where indigenous people were honoring the shift into what they call the time of the grandmother dreaming. So it's the time out of the grandfather dreaming. And so, to use more Western terms, we're talking about the shift from patriarchy to something else, something more infused with feminine energy or feminine wisdom or nurturing creation kind of vibes. And so the model of mainstream leadership is very masculine, very male. And so what I mean by that, it's very unilateral, very directional, very hierarchical, very analytical, very mechanical, and it's very and it cannot. And the shadow side is domination. This sort of domination and conquering and colonialism and claiming. This is the way that leaders of companies lead, just like kings of medieval countries would lead, because these viruses still flow through our culture, right? And so evolved or awakened leadership requires an absolute reimagining of what it is to be, of what leadership is, and really a cleaning up of this ancestral trauma that has been passed down from child to, from father to son, all along, and mother to daughter. It's been passed down, and we've got the responsibility to clean it up. And it requires us to actually reimagine what it is to be a human being with both the masculine and the feminine energies flowing through us. It requires us to perceive all the ways in which we show up in that kind of like shadow side of masculinity, if we're men, dominating and being forceful and conquering and claiming, and all the little ways that we do. And it's about us initiating into a more pure sense of manhood, in which we can hold both the divine powers of creation and femininity and nurturing and that deep, profound wisdom of the grandmothers. And we can also hold that powerful, penetrative, mission-guided power of what the pure masculine represents as well. And so, to put it simply, the highest paradigm of awakened leadership is the integration, the purest integration of those twin forces, those twin energies that flow through all of us.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Jiro. And I guess to follow that up, or to bring that back full circle and come back to where you're at the moment and your mission right now and what you're building to bring awakened leadership into the world. Do you tell us more about what you're working on right now?
Sure. So for the last 8 years or so, I've tended to work with CEOs and tech founders to help them evolve as human beings, but also as leaders, and to lead companies that lead to the more beautiful, the more awakened in the world. And more recently, I've chosen to expand my offerings and work with more men. And so I lead a program called Shambhala Warrior, which is a portal. It's a kind of new dimension, a new paradigm of training. It's not a course. It's not really a program. It's a journey, an initiatory journey that men go on to learn the deep spiritual wisdom and the skills and the techniques and the practices to really step up as leaders and to bring forth a mission that is in contribution to all of life. And so that's the work that I do through Shambhala Warrior.
Thanks, man. So I guess to close it off there, where can people find out more about you, the program, and anything else that you want to sort of tell people about here today, man?
Yeah, easy. Just go to my name, Jiro Taylor, JiroTaylor, and .com, and that'll guide you everywhere. Find me on social, same things. Yeah,
cool. Thank you, bro. And Shaun?
Yeah, best place to find me is on Instagram, just Shaun_Coop, SHAUN_COOP. And how about you, Les?
Yep, you can find me on my website, findingspace.co, and through socials as well. It's at findingspace.co. You can also reach Shaun and I through our email address for the podcast if you want to ask us any questions, be a guest on the podcast, or provide any feedback, whatever. The Hustle and Flow podcast at gmail.com.
Cool. And I just want to take a moment, Jiro, to really thank you for being here today and for sharing everything you have with us. Definitely an interesting path that you've led, and one that, I think it sounds like you're only a few steps along the road down. And it's going to be interesting to see how that journey unfolds for you and the leaders that you're going to awaken along the process. I think that's going to be really cool to see as well.
Sure is, brother. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And for those of you listening, if you found some nuggets in here today, just like I have, we ask that you just share it with one other person. That's how we grow the listenership for our podcast. We want to get these conversations to the ears of more people that, might find their own nuggets in here and help themselves. So until next time, guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jiro. See you guys.